Welcome to the Spiritual and Empowerment Living with Tia podcast, a sacred place and resource for spiritually centered women who want to go from the mundane to the magical life, for overcoming fear and doubt, reconnecting with the goddess, understanding messages from spirit, and uncovering your spiritual gifts so you can finally live the life you deserve. Hello, Spiritual Trailblazers. We're talking about one of my favorite subjects. You know, it's an annual thing, and we have a very interesting guest here I can't wait to introduce you to. So, charmed by curiosity, Kirsty lives in an avant-garde of life where she explores new ground and holds space for others to grow. As such, she covers and illuminates beauty and brilliance in the individual, especially where it is overlooked or atypical. Kirsty is obsessed with the exploration of consciousness and the inherent potential we have to truly create and nurture our best, most happy, purposeful, meaningful lives. She and Morgana, who is her business partner, are launching a manifesting institute very soon, and they are progressing towards a new spiritual approach to manifesting where it is called Faith Craft. And then you can find more about that on Kirsty Lucinda Allan.com/work-with-me/member. Gosh, I was struggling so much today. Kirsty, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tia. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Yeah, it's so interesting because I know, like, getting ready for this, I was a little bit I need to get the questions right and things like that. It was a lot of mental preparation, and then I got a little bit jittery.
You got jittery. I was jittery. I'm new to this. This is this is a whole new world for me, all with podcasts and all this digital whatnot. But here I am, so thank you.
No problem. So as we were talking before we started recording, you're based in Scotland, and I'm all the way in the States in Pennsylvania. And yet traditions like Samhain made its way all the way across the seas. So can you give us a background behind this one? What was my favorite holiday?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. Samhain, which obviously more usually known as Halloween, is an ancient Celtic festival. It's actually a harvest festival. It's where, the ancient people of this particular land would have celebrated the end of summer and the beginning of the winter time, and therefore the end of their harvest. So they would be celebrating by baking and using those crops. So they would make sweet things to share and to eat, to make treats. They'd also be using this time to reflect on the difference between the light and the dark. And that as it was what they called the turning of the wheel, it was becoming the end of the year and the beginning of the next year. So the 31st was the end of the year. The first was actually Celtic New Year. So it's thought that at midnight at that time between the two dates, that the veil between the worlds of the living and the dead was at its thinnest. And that in celebration of life and death, this was the time of year where ancestors could be contacted, but also that unwanted entities may also be making an appearance. They would maybe interfere with crops. They could frighten, local people. They could be all sorts of mischief. And that's actually where we get the concept of guising from, which in America, you guys know it more as like trick or treat, like the dressing up. But for us, it was very important that, and children participated in this and still do today. So in Scotland, if you see people guising, you see that people are out in the streets dressed up, going from house to house. And the reason they do this is actually to frighten away the unwanted entities. The same with the carving of lanterns and burning things as well. So again, it's about releasing the power that the evil or the unwanted may have over us. And so in Scotland, those costumes would always be thematic of scary things. You would never get a sexy whatever in Halloween.
Right.
No, that's definitely more of an American tradition to have a sexy nurse or a sexy anything really. we don't tend to have that. But that's where really your trick-or-treating would have come from. It would be the children going around the homes, guising, literally in disguise. That's where the word comes from. And they would be doing that in exchange for these treats. But of course, what we have to do, and we still do to this day, is we actually perform for those treats. Whereas I'm aware in America, it's just this idea of trick or treat, but nobody ever performs a trick, right? But in Scotland, in the actual tradition, that it would be required of you, you'd have to perform a trick. And it's not necessarily a mischief trick. It could be telling a joke or singing a song, doing a dance, basically any kind of piece of entertainment, a party trick, a party piece. And in exchange for that, you would be given, like what we call toffee apples. You guys would call them candied apples. You would be baked goods and sweets and fruits and things like that from the season, again, marking the fact that it is a harvest festival. And that's kind of, the basis of it there, really. Another comparison that we would have would be that you guys have the pumpkin carving. Traditionally in Scotland, it would have been turnips, because we didn't have pumpkins. The pumpkins are far better, they're far more effective for sure. They make much better lanterns, especially when you look at the size of an actual turnip. It's about the size of your fist if you're lucky. But traditionally in Scotland, it was actually turnip or neep carving, as we might have called it then. So I always have this joke at this time of year that, here's this little pumpkin. He doesn't know that he's culturally appropriating a turnip.
Oh, wow, yeah, how about that?
But it's okay, because a turnip's a turnip. He doesn't really care. It's fine.
Now, all that is so very interesting, but I think a turnip looks more scary and probably do the job better than a pumpkin. Pumpkins are cute.
They're cute, yeah.
Scary face.
Turnips are a bit more gnarly, aren't they? They're kind of, they're kind of bumpy and, a bit less even. But yeah, you're right. There's quite a good category there for vegetables, I think, is to have cute and non-cute vegetables. That should be more of a thing.
Yeah. And I love the explanation of the light and the dark and the new year. And, sometimes I wonder, especially, just tapping a little bit into past lives, people who are just naturally drawn to this holiday, they don't understand why. And they just sense that newness during October 31st as opposed to December 31st.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's more natural, really. I mean, we look at how the seasons change around that time. There is a real marked sudden kind of difference of summer is definitely ended now, and winter's definitely setting in. Whereas kind of the middle of winter, it's still just the middle of winter. It doesn't really feel like at New Year that there's really much of a change. Mm-hmm. So, it does make kind of seasonal sense to note the turning of the wheel or the new year at this time. But there's lots of other really interesting, cultural comparisons and histories all entangled in it as well. For example, like the symbol of the apple comes up a lot in Halloween. And it's thought that actually became entwined with Samhain when the Romans invaded Britain. And they kind of merged their culture with the Celtic culture that was there. And so they had this tradition of apples, apple picking, apple peeling, apple eating, to do with the goddess of plenty called Pomona. And it was on this same date. So that's where, the apple bobbing, or duking as we call it in Scotland, comes from. And so it's another really interesting tie-in there with this idea of harvest, with this idea of making sweet things, preserves perhaps for the year ahead. And again, apples being, very entwined in biblical symbolism and, lots of other cultures as well, has been something that it kind of entails this idea of knowledge and power and transformation. So it's just another really kind of interesting point there. But the name Halloween actually really came in the sort of about the 700s with Pope Gregory III decided to take the Celtic celebration and kind of merge it with something more appropriate for the church, and that's where it became All Hallows Eve. And then it was like All Saints Day on the 1st. So All Hallows Eve gradually became Halloween. That's where we get the name from. But that's a kind of a potted history there. But it's such an interesting time of year. It's one that's deeply revered for honouring the dead, but also it has this immense sense of fun about it and a real celebration of life. And I think that's one of the things that, from a Scottish point of view, we really kind of love the fact that America goes crazy and was like really adopted it and really, just made it into this amazing, family festival, which really taps into the Celtic spirit, because the Celts really are the party people, they're kind of famous throughout time for it. And so it's a really nice blend of ancient culture and a contemporary reinterpretation of it. So I really love all aspects of it personally, including all like the plastic pumpkins and sweets and stuff like that.
That's awesome that you said that, because I was going to ask you, how did you feel about some of the newer ways it's celebrated? Because when I was reading up on it and I learned, things like you were talking about, the church changed the name or merged, several things. I'm thinking, why couldn't you just leave it alone? I mean, don't get me wrong, pumpkins are cuter than turnips, but I like a portion of history preserved, especially in this case.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you can look at something like Celtic culture and you can see that it over and over and over and over again, it's been adapted, it's been sort of co-opted by lots of different other cultures, and in particular obviously the church. That's what it does, right? It's quite prolific in its ability to kind of merge itself with the existing cultures of any particular land and then sort of carry on as though that's always been the case. But with the concept of it, the point is to be a celebration, and it's to be a day of honouring and and a night of fun. And I think that we can get really caught up in the social politics of it all. And at the end of the day, at the end of the year, we all really just want to celebrate. And so I think it's important to be accepting to new interpretations, and the fact that it is a celebration of that culture. It's not quite the same as where a culture is appropriated in terms of a company making money from it, or that it's lost its original message. All of that's still there. The message is still there. This is about more people getting to join in, even if it's a bit different and they don't know as much about it. Well, it's a start, and hopefully the people who really love Halloween will be looking more and more into the symbolism and the meaning behind it, and they will draw something really important for themselves, because it's about humanity. It's about all of us together, rather than necessarily belonging to any one particular bunch of people.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, I really liked how you especially emphasize that it's not like a company capitalizing on it. It's people celebrating it over the years, because originally it's about celebration. Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective.
Thank you. I feel, obviously I'm speaking for myself. I can't really speak for,
Right.
all people of Scotland. They're all people of any kind of Celtic heritage or whatever. But there's a general sentiment, among the sort of like the Celts, of wanting to share. If you ever come to Scotland or Ireland or any of the places where the Celtic identity is still quite apparent, you'll find that the people are super welcoming. They can't wait to get you in their homes, and they want you to stay, and they want to feed you and then feed you more, and they want you to drink with them, and they just want to be your friend. And it's a real culture of community. And I think that is still very prevalent today. And it would be a shame for people to kind of lose sight of that for the sake of, trending arguments. The only thing that kind of bothers me really is just sometimes you get this overemphasis on this sexy witch thing. Given that there was a history of people being unfairly tried and killed for said apparent crimes, maybe dressing up as their sexy effigies on the day that their people honor their dead, it's not appropriate somehow. It's a bit like as I've sort of mentioned before, it'd be where people dress up as a Native American because it's Thanksgiving, it'd be a
Right.
bit like that. But other than that, there's no harm to be done in sharing. I think it's good. I think it's important that we celebrate it together, and that we are co-educating each other, because we can draw on the new ideas and the new ways of doing things and the new recipes, and also with the ever-growing contemporary culture for witchcraft and for Wicca and for other kind of Celtic ways of being, and Druidry and things like that. It's always insightful to listen to other people's experiences and points of view and how they came to it, rather than just to assume.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I have this annual episode. And I know there are other holidays, but it's just something about Samhain, and I know there's several ways to pronounce it, but there's just something about this holiday that I'm just like, I want people to know the history. I want people to celebrate it. I want people to embrace even more of it. So you did mention that when, if someone comes to Scotland, they people want to invite them to their home. So do a lot of people go to Scotland for Samhain?
Not really. No, I think most people don't even realise that's where it comes from, and that's there is a bit of a bone of contention here in the UK for that. The United Kingdom here is made up of Scotland, England, Northern Ireland, Wales, Channel Islands, and a few other places. And most people maybe don't know that. But what's really frustrating is that in the UK itself, most people don't realise that Halloween comes from Scotland, and they think largely it's an American tradition that's come over here. And that's really, really frustrating.
Wow.
Yeah, and people in Scotland know, because we've all grown up with it. It's just the normal thing, and we go around the doors, we go guising, and you perform a trick, you get a trick, and it's this fun thing you do, and it's all about having a scary costume, and it's all about the living in the dead and the harvest and all of these things. We're like, yeah, obviously. But then, you go across the border into England, and people go, oh, this American tradition, eh? Or they call it trick or treating, and they get no idea they're supposed to tell a joke. It's so it's frustrating that the people that we share or sort of the land with don't know the history. But that's a wider problem, though, that's over here, where, for example, Scottish history generally isn't taught in anywhere but Scotland. So there's quite a lot of there's a lot of information that's missing, let's just say, in our national curriculum.
Right. Yeah, I can definitely emphasize with, certain history not being taught, or very little of it being taught. And that's really, that's a shame, because I know, I would love to go to Scotland and celebrate some type of way in Scotland one year.
Yeah, you must come. I mean, also, it's like if people if people enjoy spooky places, right? Come to Scotland. There's a castle every 2 miles. We trip over them. They're everywhere. It's like you can't move for haunted castles. They're just everywhere. So it's definitely, for such a tiny country, is absolutely packed with folklore, legends, the paranormal, everything you would want for Halloween.
Perfect. So you actually have a background in the paranormal and psychology.
That's right.
So,
I do.
Yeah. So during this time of the year, I know that the veil is thinning, so people see more things. Do you notice a spike in paranormal activity during this time of the year?
Yeah, definitely. I think I would carefully phrase it as saying people experiencing things, as in there would be a spike in paranormal experience, because I obviously can't comment on whether it's genuine activity or not. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Who can? It's one of those big in very, very tricky areas to discuss, because what we discuss when we're talking about the paranormal is we're talking about very, very deeply personal experiences, because it's very unusual where more than one person has the experience at the particular time. So, for example, people maybe say they have a ghost encounter or a spirit, or however they phrase it. It's entirely idiosyncratic to them, and it's very subjective. It's very unusual you'd have a second person who said, oh yeah, I was there and I saw it too. So when we talk about the paranormal, it can be quite contentious. But over my years of studying this from a scientific point of view, I studied in parapsychology postgraduates, and also as a field researcher looking at hauntings and people's, we call it anomalous experiences. And what fascinates me the most is not so much about how you go about trying to prove or disprove the existence of something, because ultimately, as I said, it's subjective. It's very, very hard to do that. I'm far more interested in the meaning of it. What is the actual, the transpersonal effect on the person who has the experience? Mm. What tends to be consistent and that you can measure is exactly that. It's the transformation. People who have these experiences tend to be moved or changed very, very suddenly in a very particular direction, regardless of maybe what their previous beliefs had been. When they encounter something that is saying, hey, this is a very convincing experience about the possibility of life after death, then that person's highly unlikely to go back to their old ways of thinking. People become far more conscious of their choices, their ethical choices, their eco choices. They become far more open-minded to belief systems and the differences of faith and theories of consciousness as well. So it is a fascinating world, right from like the kind of grassroots leisure level of like ghost hunting companies.
Yeah.
Yeah, right up to people who have like transcendental experiences, and they feel like they actually meet the divinities and those kinds of experiences. The whole gamut I just find really, really fascinating, because there's a very, very strong shared human propensity to want to know. It's all about the big questions. It's not so much, are ghosts real? Yes or no? That's not really what people want to know. People want to know about the nature of life and death. They want to know about the meaning of life and what happens when we die. And that's really what we're asking. But we don't tend to confront those big questions very well. So we break them down into things like, do you believe in ghosts, or do you believe in aliens, or that kind of thing. So just find it fascinating.
That is fascinating. I never heard someone talk about the experience of the person. It's more so what you were saying beforehand is, people trying to prove it or not, asking, hello, someone there, or, what's your name? But that was very interesting how you went into the change a person experience when they have that, or even asking the question about them changing. I never heard anyone talk about that before.
Okay. From my own observations I'm an experiencer myself. I've had a life of experiences that I can't explain. But then working with people and observing them have those experiences too. Obviously, their experiences were different from mine, and I could never tell because I'm not in their head, right? So, which may be paranormal in itself. But it's watching people actually go through the transformation, and that, to me, is all the evidence you need that something is important, that something that there's a realness to it, regardless of what your beliefs are. To watch someone actually undergo a transformation, that is real, and that you can measure, and you can get the commonalities between people who have, like, for example, a near-death experience, or where they talk about like having left their body, that they go towards a light, or that they meet people from who passed on from their past. All of these things, all of these components, and then you compare them all cross-culturally, and you find that it's this commonality. And what happens is not so much, is it proof of life after death? Well, we don't know. We're never going to know that, right? But what we can measure is the change that happens in that person. They always seem to come back with a far more conscious way of being in the world. They've expanded, basically. They go through an expansion process. So if that's not fascinating to research, then I don't know what is. Statistics, at the end of the day, statistics are not that interesting, I find. But massive shifts in human consciousness, they're pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, I can totally see how that's of importance and very interesting. And it just makes me think, when people, celebrate, just going back to the holiday, celebrate holidays, how they change and what they experience really sets the precedence for how they move forward. Because when we really dive into these holidays and do some of the their rituals for the holidays, whether it's communicating with the dead, having that altar up, really acknowledging the light and the dark. There's something to be said about that on a deeper level. Just like you were saying, there's more to this than yes or no. It doesn't go to this.
Yeah, well, that's it, and when you look at the yes and no questions around things, and at the end of the day, they're not very helpful because you believe what you believe. So, what difference does it make? It's all about the experience. It's all about transformation. And that's really what Halloween is all about. It's about transforming, from light to dark. It's about the energy shifting. It's about going from, summer to winter. It's about going from the end of the year to the new year. Again, really coincidentally, we have, of course, a blue moon, a full moon this Halloween.
Yes.
And moons are obviously symbolic of a woman's progress. And when you have the full moon, it's like she's full term and she's now ready to release. So it's like the birthing of something new. And so we have the full moon at Halloween, which I think is kind of quite unusual. It happens one every 18 years or something. But it's also a blue moon, which means it's the second full moon of this month, which is unusual in itself. Then again, we can symbolically take those on board and see how they really, really magnify this idea of transformation, this idea of letting go what has been and embracing the new and holding space for the new to unfold, to be born. And again, that really ties in with this bigger, greater theme of spiritual growth. And as I said, I keep using the word transformation, but I feel it's just really, really apt. I could go on for hours about that.
Yeah, I'm just soaking up all this information. I'm just listening and soaking it up like, wow, yes, thank you. So do you have a ritual that you do each year, or do you change it up? Sometimes you do a ritual by yourself, you do it with friends. What do you do?
Yeah, I usually just end up doing something on my own. Although I have done it within groups before. I just find keeping it really simple is really good. Having aspects of your ritual are there to amplify your experience. It's like maybe you choose like some oil or incense. Maybe you choose certain colors. It's things that have the vibration of what you're transforming with. So I tend to find a kind of a dark corner, and what I do is I light a single candle. I mean, I do it as a single candle rather than as one for everybody I know that might have passed on, because that it's a kind of a difficult task. And what if you forget someone? So I light a single one, and it kind of represents all of us. All who have passed and all who will pass, and reminding me of the unity of us all as well, that we are one. We are the one flame together. Although we may have our individual life and death, our individual transformations, we are all one as a species, as an expression of the universe, as an expression of the divine. We are all aspects of that singularity, of that one looking back on itself. So I light one candle, and I sit and I meditate with it for a while on this wider idea of death before life, not necessarily the other way around, and that sometimes things have to pass to be transformed, that the energy is never destroyed, it's simply transformed, and that we return to a source. And so that's really what I do. I use mirrors as well. I tend to have a mirror and I gaze a little into the mirror. There's a process called psychomantium, which is quite popular with like paranormal investigators, etc. There's different theories around how psychomantium works, but it's literally just gently gazing at your own reflection. And what actually happens, and there's a big debate about this, but what happens is that your features morph, and you will find that other faces will look back at you. Psychology quite often will refer to this as something called the Troxler effect, where it's it's to do with your attention blurring into ambiguity, allowing you then to react to the possibility of a face and then seeing one. A bit like humans have a tendency to see faces where there aren't any, for example, in a bush or in long grass or something like that. And that's just thought to be a survival, mechanism, a sort of hangover from our earlier evolution, where it's better to see a lion's, be mistaken and see a lion's face hiding in a bush, and you run, there was no lion. Better that than you don't see it and you get eaten. So it's thought that there's a combination of that ambiguity when you gaze and that anxiety response coming together that allow you to see these faces. However, it's a theory, paired up with another theory. But when you do psychomancy and you have the experience of seeing these faces, it is pretty profound. The people that look back at you or the images that you see are very, very engaging, very enthralling. And again, whether it's this or whether it's that, I don't think it's really important. What is important is the meaning that I draw from it, because that's what informs my transformation.
Right. It has to be meaningful in a way for us. I was thinking when you said it, past lives, I was just thinking maybe those are my faces from past lives. Yeah. Someone else could think that's their ancestor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We'll never know for sure, right? We can't prove it, but maybe when we stop focusing on everything has to be neatly packaged into a yes or a no, everything has to be neatly proven or disproven, when we can let go of that, we'll let go of that need for certainty with everything, then we'll leave ourselves actually entirely wide open to all possibility and therefore to transform and to grow fully and completely as spiritual beings rather than as intellectual beings that, that has this need for understanding in that very scientific way.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And I think that's why people who are more spiritually inclined just have a very fulfilling life, plus the bonus of that magic, because it's when we see something, it's like a knowing. For example, I was talking to a friend about something and I was telling her, like, I was really excited. Now I'm nervous about a decision that I eventually would have to make. And then as I was talking to her, I looked down, I saw a feather, and I just thought, I said out loud, like, oh, okay, everything's going to be okay. And I just stopped talking about it. But to someone else, to her, it probably was just a regular feather, a dirty feather on the ground. But for me, it was, an angelic feather letting me know, Tia, you don't have to worry about this decision. It's going to work out.
Well, that's really beautiful. It's a really good example. I feel like with the feather and with things we might use in ritual, these are all like amplifiers of your intuition. Mm-hmm. So for your friend, a feather is just a feather. Okay, fine. But for you in that moment, it was more than that because it stirred something intuitive within you. Mm-hmm. And that's where the importance is. That's where the meaning is. I think of the amount of times we maybe don't notice things in our environment like feathers or, leaves or twigs landing that look like arrows or whatever else. Right. The amount of times that people probably do see ghosts and they have all sorts of paranormal experiences, but they don't notice it. We think about all of those, and again, it's like we're trying to almost quantify and science everything. Mm-hmm. But it's about that meaning in the moment. What does it mean to a person? And if that feather was signifying to you that intuitive inner feeling, then that is what's important, because ultimately you are the experiencer. The experience isn't happening just independently of its own. It's happening because you're experiencing it.
Right. And so one of the things I'm definitely going to do on Samhain is, and you talked about burning a candle, staring into the fire. And since we're on the lines of talking about, how the experience, the interpretation is per person, how do you feel about having a bonfire on Samhain? Just a group of people looking into it and that being their ritual.
I think that's really lovely because there's two elements there. There's the personal meaning, the personal experience that each person will have, but there's also the collective one. And so by sharing that one fire together, it's a bit like having the single flame. It's symbolizing the unity of all of those people and all of humanity. And also that it's a shared space, that there's a huge amount of trust between everybody. And that it's a safe space for people to, destroy that which doesn't serve them and let go to the closing year by burning, the things that they want to release, which of course leaves everybody together in a space to bring in the new and what they do want. So I think there's something very beautiful about the kind of sacred nature of holding space for one another, like without judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, my cat's here. You can probably hear him. He's trying to join.
It's okay. He has a lot to say. He's like, yes.
Yeah, yeah. He's like, let's chat more cat food. Yeah.
So
Mhm.
did you think about maybe tapping into the energies to get a sense of the next year? Every year I use it's called the Halloween Oracle cards. And I use it just to get a theme for the year. And I just think, especially with the full moon being on Samhain, it's such a great sign. So I was just curious, did you think about tapping in and see what's the theme for the next year?
Yeah, it probably won't surprise you, but the theme is transformation. Funnily enough, but I think with all of those potencies there, with it being the full moon, with it being a blue moon, with it being Halloween, with so many shifts in my life at the moment as well, and coming on this show, for example, all of these things align and really show me that shared transformation is super important. It's about holding the space for each other to grow. It's about acknowledging that there is now a sort of spirituality rising, like I keep calling it religion 4.0, like it's this new wave that's starting to emerge because we're in a time of intense difficulty for people, with coronavirus and all the knock-on effects that's had has provoked mass anxiety. And when we think of anxiety, it's not just worrying about the little things. It's worrying, again, it's these big questions that we tend to avoid in life. It's wanting to know what happens when we die. What is point in life? What is our place in the universe? Is there a God, etc.? All of these things. And when people are faced with a crisis, then they seek reassurance and they seek agency. They seek to be able to take charge of things for themselves, to have a kind of sense of directing their own fate. And that involves faith. It involves putting faith in the spiritual world, to trust their intuition and their emotions over, information and the sort of more scientific and knowledge-based world that we tend to, hitherto had been relying on. People are now reaching out and they're having to do it, like I said, with faith. And so I think that the meaning here is to continue that work, to hold space for people, to encourage them to take a chance on themselves, to find that actually maybe spirituality can allow them to grow despite the feeling that everything around them is stunting their growth. It could be like a lack of job, it could be like health problems, it could be the inability to see their friends and loved ones. It could be all of these things where they feel restricted, but actually, rather than looking out there at what's going on, turn inward and understand that faith and go on that journey. And I feel like I get this message very much recently, very, very strongly, that intuition is actually an inner pathway to the divine. Mm-hmm. And then as we, turn the wheel of the year and we step into, the Celtic New Year, we can really acknowledge that it's time to let go of the paradigm of, trusting in just the numbers, just the data, just the, what the man on the television tells you to do. It's not so much about just accepting what to think. It's about understanding how to think and how to feel, and how to, have that sense of agency that we aren't beholden to the authorities in the way that we have assumed for so long. It's time to burn the dogma. It's time to release those limiting beliefs and hold that space for the new spirituality to be born.
Yes. I love that you said take a chance on yourself. Man, that gave me a sense of relief. And I take chances on myself. I feel like people just need to hear this every so often. It's so true, especially when it's so easy to get caught up in a lot of things. I remember even on your website, you talked about being normal and the illusion and things like that. And it just makes me think that sometimes, especially I noticed this with people who aren't spiritually inclined, that sometimes they get so consumed with the world that they forget who they are, what they can do, and how they can move past something. Like, of course, there are horrible things that happen, but sometimes we get caught up in things before it even happens. So then if something does happen, there's that extra layer of anxiety. And I know even sometimes spiritual people go through this too, but sometimes I think it's easier for us to get back on the bandwagon. And easy is like a loose term I'm using here, because we notice certain signs or we know things to do to help get us through this. So that faith and spirituality, I think, helps a lot, especially during these times.
Yeah, it really does. I think the key word here is it's faith, and it's about letting go of the need for certainty and kind of surrendering to uncertainty. And that's really what spirituality is all about, really. You know, whether you have this belief or that belief and share those beliefs with that group, but different ones with another group, it's all kind of academic and personal. At the bottom of it all, underneath it all, it's about surrendering to the uncertainty and being okay with that. It's about, you know, it's the faith that really is what it comes down to. The faith that there's more to all of this than you'd ever been worrying about. You know, that we all come from the stars. We're all made of star stuff. We're all powered by starlight. You know, so maybe it's okay just to have faith that we are that star. You know, that we are all one. We're all these like little scintillations of the universe looking back at itself. You know, and that's perhaps the point of life, is to live. You know, that is to fully express ourselves as the expressions of the universe. That's, you know, really the fundamental how we're here, to allow ourselves to be and to encourage each other just to do the same. So, I mean, I do feel like anxiety right now is one of the biggest topics and one of the biggest hurdles. It's a personal, individual experience, yet it's also one which is a community experience. It's a global experience. It's a human experience. And the opposite of anxiety really is faith. You know, it's about just, it's hope. You know, it's about moving into that space and allowing yourself to be fully immersed in it. Because we have a choice. People often forget that. We do have a choice. You can choose it. You can choose to move towards spirit. You can choose to move towards faith and unity. It might feel scary. It might provoke anxiety. Oh, the irony, right? But what's the alternative? Just to be in fear? And for what? To not grow?
Right. Yeah. All beautiful. I love the, you know, we're stars looking back at ourselves. People need to have your sayings throughout their house. Because seriously, it's so easy to forget everything that we learned when life happens. You know, like you said, the man on the TV, like it's so easy to forget. And to have these reminders can easily snap us right back on course.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really what's motivating Morgana and I, and all the work that we do with individuals, and also now with Faithcraft that we're developing. You know, it's encouraging people to do it for themselves, you know, and to step into the place of faith, to step into the place of possibility, to really manifest what they do want in life as opposed to what they don't want in life. You know, and that does take a little bit of risk, but that's the fun bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So second to final question, do you have any books or websites you can recommend for people who want to dive deeper into the origin and meaning of Samhain?
You could check out Morgana's work for sure. She has a PhD and she really looked into witch trials and how people formed beliefs. So she's definitely a great source on that. And that's morganamccabeallan.com. As for books on, you know, maybe Celtic history, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I can find out and I can send you a link and you can be put down. I do have a book that I've written, which I would like to recommend if anyone should be interested in how to turn anxiety into that sense of personal faith. Then it's called Ironic Fundamentalism, and you can get that on Amazon if anyone would like to have a look at why anxiety could actually be the motivating force for manifesting that you never realized you had. So I'd like to recommend that. And if people could just, come and check out our website. So as I said, it's morganamccabeallan.com and KirstyLucindaAllan.com. We're not actually related, strangely enough. We just happen to have the same surname.
I was going to ask you that. Oh my goodness.
It's quite funny though, because I was always an Allan, and then Morgana was McCabe, and then she got married, and at her wedding, I don't know why, but it felt like I won something. It's like, you're an Allan now, I win. And it was like, I don't know why I'm saying that, but here we go. So it's like somehow Clan Allan had acquired her. So happy days. But if people would check out our websites, and then we can find out more information from there as well about the Manifesting Institute, which is going to be launching incredibly soon. And it's very much about empowering people to figure out what they really want and what they really need, because that's like the biggest part of the whole manifesting conundrum, is actually getting clear on that bit. And then we talk people through a 7-step process for actually making it come true, for actually manifesting. And there's also another project in the pipeline which will be coming apparent quite soon as well, and that's actually on paranormal experience and how to understand it and how to go about like working out the meaning for you. So again, for more information, if you just check out our websites. And I've got this little book in front of me here, actually, which I thought was great. It's the first book on like witchcraft that I ever read when I was 14. It's The Power of the Witch by Laurie Cabot, an American author. First one I ever read, and it blew my mind. It really was like, there was like permission to be authentic. That was how I felt when I read it. So I would really recommend that to anybody who's looking for a first read. It's really comprehensive. It does go into history of Halloween and stuff as well, so it would be a really good one.
I will put the links in the description of this episode. And Power of the Witch. Yeah, I had to read that. I get a little frustrated sometimes because I wish some of these books were summer reading for kids. Because it solves a lot of things. Like I remember looking back, I used to pretend to be a queen or a witch. Like it's so fascinating. Like every year, I mean, I wasn't My Little Pony, when I was like 8 or whatever like that. But as time went by, I just noticed these things I would do as a kid. I'm like, oh my gosh, this whole time. So if I only had books like that.
Yeah, that's it. I think it for children as well, it really taps into like what we're drawn to certain archetypes, aren't we? And these are shared ideas, sort of like collective knowledge, and that people express on an individual basis. And it's a shame that things have become really politicized as well about, who gets to be a princess and what does that mean? And it's like, well, everybody should get to be a princess, and equally everybody should get to be the witch, and to celebrate the diversity, the pluralism, and also the collective aspect of it as well, just to be again, this unity that we are all one. Maybe there's a gap in the market there. Maybe Tia, we could be thinking about writing some books.
Yeah, definitely.
For the younger readers. Obviously Harry Potter, has covered a fair bit there, but there's always room. There's always room.
There's always room. Yes, because when I talk to people or even work with them, one of the things I hear, usually the main thing is they thought they were crazy because they have all these, gifts or just
sure.
Things that happen to them. And like you were saying, it gets politicized and sometimes words get demonized. And now they have a lot of anxiety. That's another key word of this episode, because they were told, this is wrong, this is bad, or you're crazy. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It goes back to that paradigm of everything having to be explained and everything having to fit in a box of it's this or it's that. It's real or it's not real. It's proven or it's not proven, or it exists or it doesn't exist. And so once we can start dispensing with that strange need, then actually we become entirely free to think and to feel. It's intuition's a funny thing because it's strangely counterintuitive, because we tend to say things in retrospect, like, oh, I knew that was going to happen, or oh, I had a funny feeling about him, those sorts of things. And it's like there's intuition. It's always talking to you, telling you things, but we tend to recognize it in retrospect. So big irony there. If your intuition feels counterintuitive, then you really need to listen to it. It's really trying to tell you something. And that's why I think that is the meaning that we take from our experiences, personally and collectively. That's so important, is you have to trust the intuitive response, the intuitive understanding, not the factual quote unquote understanding.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Any final words?
No, thank you very much for having me on, and would love to hear from your listeners if they've got any questions, just to get in touch with myself and Morgana. And and happy Halloween.
Thank you. Yes, I learned a lot, and I was soaking up all the information you were saying, and I am so much better for that now. I just love learning, and I know the listeners are also soaking up this knowledge and are in an even better place knowing the origin. It's always good to know origins.
Definitely, yeah. It really informs us. And then, of course, there's always the personal origins for each individual, how you came to know about it and what did it mean for you then and how is that transformed and so on. And so, yeah, I'd just say go enjoy it. Everyone should just work with Halloween, how it manifests for them, and chart the difference, chart the progress, notice the before, notice the after, the turning of the wheel, and set good intentions for yourself, for growth, for transformation, and to let go of that which doesn't serve you. Let it go with the moon, let it go with the fires, let it go with the turning of the wheel.
Mm-hmm. And for those who don't know, I didn't think about saying this earlier, the turning of the wheel, it just symbolizes a different portion of the year. So next is going to be Yule, and that's like the winter season, and for some people Christmas. So that's what she means. It's just different holidays throughout the seasons, coordinations throughout the year.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So everyone, I am sending you many blessings. I am rooting for you as always. And remember to be kind to yourself. Until next time. As always, Spiritual Trailblazer, thank you for tuning in. Do make sure to stop by and visit me at tiamariejohnson.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe. Last but not least, be kind to yourself. I'm rooting for you. And I'm sending you so many blessings. Until next time.